The history of the Republic of Venice traditionally begins with its foundation at noon on Friday, the 25th of March AD 421, by authorities from Padua, to establish a trading post in that region of northern Italy. The founding of the Venetian Republic also was marked with the founding of the Church of St. James. The early city of Venice existed as a collection of lagoon communities who united for mutual defense against the Lombards. As the power of the Byzantine Empire dwindled in northern Italy in the late 7th century, early in the 8th century, the people of the lagoon elected the first leader, Orso Ipato, who was confirmed by Byzantium with the titles of hypatus and dux. Historically, Ursus was the first doge of Venice. Tradition, however, since the early 11th century, dictates that the Venetians first proclaimed one Paolo Lucio Anafesto Duke in AD 697, although the tradition dates only from the Chronicle of John, Deacon of Venice. Nonetheless, the power base of the first doges was in Erechlia. Rise. Ursus's successor, D'Urstedt, moved his seat from Erechlia to Malamocco in the 740s. He was the son of Ursus and represented the attempt of his father to establish a dynasty. Such attempts were more than commonplace among the doges of the first few centuries of Venetian history, but all were ultimately unsuccessful. During the reign of D'Urstedt, Venice became the only remaining Byzantine possession in the north, and the changing politic of the Frankish Empire began to change the factional division of Venetia. One faction was decidedly pro-Byzantine. They desired to remain well connected to the empire. Another faction, republican in nature, believed in continuing along a course towards practical independence. The other main faction was pro-Frankish. Supported mostly by clergy, they looked towards the new Carolingian king of the Franks, Pepin the Short, as the best provider of defense against the Lombards. A minor, pro-Lombard, faction was opposed to close ties with any of these further-off powers and interested in maintaining peace with the neighboring Lombard kingdom, which surrounded Venice except on the seaward side. D'Urstedt was assassinated and his throne usurped, but the usurper, Galagolo, suffered a like fate within a year. During the reign of his successor, Domenico Monegario, Venice changed from a fisherman's town to a port of trade and center of merchants. Shipbuilding was also greatly advanced and the pathway to Venetian dominance of the Adriatic was laid. Also during Monegario's tenure, the first dual tribunal was instituted. Each year, 2 new tribunes were elected to oversee the doge and prevent abuse of power. The pro-Lombard Monegario was succeeded in 764 by pro-Byzantine Erechline Maurizio Galbaio. Galbaio's long reign vaulted Venice forward to a place of prominence not just regionally but internationally, and saw the most concerted effort yet to establish a dynasty. Maurizio oversaw the expansion of Venetia to the Rialto Islands. He was succeeded by his equally long-reigning son, Giovanni. Giovanni clashed with Charlemagne over the slave trade and entered into a conflict with the Venetian church. Dynastic ambitions were shattered when the pro-Frankish faction was able to seize power under Obelerio degli Antinori in 804. Obelerio brought Venice into the orbit of the Carolingian Empire. However, by calling in Charlemagne's son Pepin, Rex Langobardorum, to his defense, he raised the ire of the populace against himself and his family, and they were forced to flee during Pepin's siege of Venice. The siege proved a costly Carolingian failure. It lasted 6 months, with Pepin's army ravaged by the diseases of the local swamps and eventually eventually forced to withdraw. A few months later Pepin himself died, apparently as a result of a disease contracted there. Venice thus achieved lasting independence by repelling the besiegers. This was confirmed in an agreement between Charlemagne and Nicephorus which recognized Venice as Byzantine territory and also recognized the city's trading rights along the Adriatic coast, where Charlemagne previously ordered the Pope to expel the Venetians from the Pentapolis. Early Middle Ages. The successors of Obelerio inherited a united Venice. By the Pax Nicefori, the two emperors had recognized Venetian de facto independence, while it remained nominally Byzantine in subservience. During the reigns of Agnello Participatio and his two sons, Venice grew into its modern form. Though Heraclean by birth, Agnello, first doge of the family, was an early immigrant to Rialto, and his dirigeship was marked by the expansion of Venice towards the sea via the construction of bridges, canals, bulwarks, fortifications, and stone buildings. The modern Venice, at one with the sea, was being born. Agnello was succeeded by his son Giustiniano, who brought the body of St. Mark the Evangelist to Venice from Alexandria and made him the patron saint of Venice. During the reign of the successor of the Participatio, Pietro Tredornico, Venice began to establish its military might, which would influence many a later crusade and dominate the Adriatic for centuries, and signed a trade agreement with the Holy Roman Emperor Lothair I, whose privileges were later expanded by Otto I. Tredornico secured the sea by fighting Slavic and Saracen pirates. Tredornico's reign was long and successful, but he was succeeded by the Participatio, and it appeared that a dynasty may have finally been established. Around 841, the Republic of Venice sent a fleet of 60 galleys to assist the Byzantines in driving the Arabs from Crotone, but failed. Under Pietro II Candiano, Istrian cities signed a treaty under which they accepted the Venetian economical supremacy. It was the first move towards the creation of the coastal empire in Dalmatia. The autocratic Philo-Imperial Candiano dynasty was overthrown by a revolt in 972, and the populace elected Doge Pietro I Orso. However, his conciliating policy was ineffective, and he resigned in favor of Vitale Candiano. Starting from Pietro II Orso, who reigned from 991, attention towards the mainland was definitely overshadowed by a strong push towards control of Adriatic Sea. Inner strife was pacified, and trade with the Byzantine Empire boosted by the favorable treaty with Emperor Basil II. The imperial edict granted Venetian traders freedom from taxation paid by other foreigners and the Byzantines themselves. In the year 1000, an expedition of 6 ships in Istria secured the Venetian suzerainty in the area, and Slav pirates were suppressed permanently. In the occasion, Orso named himself Duke of Dalmatia, starting the colonial empire of Venice. He died in 1008. He was also responsible of the establishment of the Marriage of the Sea ceremony. At this time, Venice had a firm control over the Adriatic Sea, strengthened by the expedition of Pietro's son Ottone in 1017, and had assumed a firm role of balance of power between the two major empires. During the long investiture controversy, an 11th century dispute between Henry IV, Holy Roman Emperor, and Pope Gregory VII over who would control appointments of church officials, Venice remained neutral, and this caused some attrition of support from the popes. Doge Domenico Salvo intervened in the war between the Normans of Apulia and the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos in favor of the latter, obtaining in exchange a bull declaring the Venetian supremacy in the Adriatic coast up up to Durazzo, as well as the exemption from taxes for his merchants in the whole Byzantine Empire, a considerable factor in the city-state's later accumulation of wealth and power, serving as middlemen for the lucrative spice and silk trade that funneled through the Levant and Egypt along the ancient kingdom of Axum and Roman Indian route via the Red Sea. The war was not a military success, but with that act the city gained total independence. In 1084, Domenico Salvo led a fleet against the Normans, but he was defeated and lost 9 great galleys, the largest and most heavily armed ships in the Venetian navy. High Middle Ages. In the High Middle Ages, Venice became wealthy through its control of trade between Europe and the Levant, and began to expand into the Adriatic Sea and beyond. Venice was involved in the Crusades almost from the very beginning. 200 Venetian ships assisted in capturing the coastal cities of Syria after the First Crusade, and in 1123 they were granted virtual autonomy in the Kingdom of Jerusalem through the Pactum Warmundi. In 1110, Ordelafo Faliero personally commanded a Venetian fleet of 100 ships to assist Baldwin I of Jerusalem in capturing the city of Sidon. In the 12th century, the Republic built a large national shipyard that is now known as the Venetian Arsenal. Building new and powerful fleets, the Republic took control over the eastern Mediterranean. The first exchange business in the world was started in Venezia to support merchants from all over Europe. The Venetians also gained extensive trading privileges in the Byzantine Empire, and the ships often provided the empire with a navy. In 1182 there was an anti-Western riot in Constantinople, with the Venetians as the main targets. The Venetian fleet was crucial to the transportation of the Fourth Crusade, but when the Crusaders could not pay for the ships, the cunning and manipulative Doge Enrico Dandolo quickly exploited the situation and offered transport to the Crusaders if they would capture the Dalmatian city of Zadar, which had rebelled against Venetian rule in 1183, placed itself under the dual protection of the papacy and King Emeric of Hungary, and had proven too well fortified for Venice to retake alone. Upon accomplishing this in 1202, the crusade was again diverted to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, another rival of Venice. The city was captured and sacked in 1204, described as one of the most profitable and disgraceful sacks of a city in history. The Venetians accompanying the fleet claimed much of the plunder from the city as payment, including the famous 4 bronze horses that were brought back to adorn St. Mark's Basilica. As a result of the partition of the Byzantine Empire that followed, Venice gained some strategic territories in the Aegean Sea, including the islands of Crete and Euboea. Moreover, some present-day cities, such as Chania on Crete, have core architecture that is substantially Venetian in origin. The Aegean Islands formed the Venetian Duchy of the archipelago. The Republic of Venice signed a trade treaty with the Mongol Empire in 1221. In 1295, Pietro Gradenigo sent a fleet of 68 ships to attack a Genoese fleet at Alexandretta. Then another fleet of 100 ships were sent to attack the Genoese in 1299. In late 14th century, Venice faced difficulties to the east, especially during the reign of Louis I of Hungary. In 1346 he made a first attempt to conquer Zadar but was defeated. In 1356 an alliance was formed by the Counts of Gorizia, Francesco I da Carrara, Lord of Padua, Nicolaus Pasha Urch of Aquileia and his half-brother Emperor Charles IV, Louis I, and the Dukes of Austria. The League's troops occupied Grado and Maggia, while Louis stripped Venice of most of Dalmatia. The siege of Treviso was a failure, but Venice suffered a severe defeat at Nerva, being forced to cede Dalmatia and Croatia to Hungary. From 1350 to 1381, Venice also fought an intermittent war with the Genoese. Initially defeated, the Venetians destroyed the Genoese fleet at the Battle of Chioggia in 1380 and retained the prominent position in eastern Mediterranean affairs, at the expense of Genoa. However, the peace caused Venice to lose several territories to other participants to the war. Conegliano was occupied by the Austrians, Treviso was taken over by Carrarese, Tenedos fell to the Byzantine Empire, Trieste fell to the Patriarchate of Aquileia, and the Serenissima lost control of Dalmatia to Hungary. In 1363, a colonial revolt broke out in Crete that needed considerable military force and 5 years to suppress. 15th century. In the early 15th century, the Venetians also began to expand their possessions in Italy, as well as along the Dalmatian coast from Istria to Albania, which was acquired from Ladislaus of Naples. Venice installed its own noblemen to govern the area, for example, Count Filippo Stipanov in Zara. This move by the Venetians was in response to the threatened expansion of Giangliazzo Visconti, Duke of Milan. Control over the northeast cross-country routes was also needed to ensure the safety of traveling merchants. By 1410, Venice had a navy of some 3,300 ships and had taken over most of Venetia, including such important cities as Verona and Padua. The situation in Dalmatia was settled in 1408 by a truce with Sigismund of Hungary. When this expired, Venice immediately invaded the Patriarchate of Aquileia, and subjugated Trau, Split, Durazzo, and other Dalmatian cities. The difficulties of Hungary allowed the Republic to consolidate its Adriatic dominions. Under Doge Francesco Foscari, the city reached the height of its power and territorial extent. In 1425 a new war broke out, this time against Filippo Maria Visconti of Milan. The victory at the Battle of Maclodio of Count of Carmagnola, commander of the Venetian army, resulted in the shift of the western border from the Adige to the Eder. However, such territorial expansion was not welcome everywhere in Venice. Tension with Milan remained high, and in 1446 the Republic had to fight another alliance, formed by Milan, Florence, Bologna and Cremona. After an initial Venetian victory under Micheletto Attendolo at Castelmaggiore, however, Visconti died and a republic was declared in Milan. The Serenissima had then a free hand to occupy Lodi and Piacenza, but was halted by Francesco Sforza. Later, Sforza and the Doge allied to allow Sforza the rule of Milan, in exchange for the cession of Brescia and Vicenza. Venice, however, again changed side when the power of Sforza seemed to become excessive. The intricate situation was settled with the Peace of Lodi, which confirmed the area of Bergamo and Brescia to the Republic. At this time, the territories under the Serenissima included much of the modern Veneto, Friuli, the provinces of Bergamo, Cremona and Trento, as well as Ravenna, Istria, and Dalmatia. Eastern borders were with the county of Gorizia and the ducal lands of Austria, while in the south was the Duchy of Ferrara. Overseas dominions included Euboea and Aegina. On May 29, 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans, but Venice managed to maintain a colony in the city and some of the former trade privileges it had had under the Byzantines. Indeed, in 1454, the Ottomans granted the Venetians the ports and trading rights. Despite the recent Ottoman defeats by John Hunyadi of Hungary and by Skanderbeg in Albania, war was unavoidable. In 1463 the Venetian fortress of Argos was ravaged. Venice set up an alliance with Matthias Corvinus of Hungary and attacked the Greek islands by sea and Bulgaria by land. The Allies were forced to retreat on both fronts. However, after several minor victories, operations were reduced mostly to isolated ravages and guerrilla attacks, until until the Ottomans moved on a massive counteroffensive in 1470. This resulted in Venice losing its main stronghold in the Aegean Sea, Negroponte. The Venetians sought an alliance with the Shah of Persia and other European powers, but, receiving only limited support, could make only small-scale attacks at Antalya, Halicarnassus and Smyrna. The Ottomans conquered the Peloponnesus and launched an offensive in the Venetian mainland, closing in on the important center of Udine. The Persians, together with the Caramanian emir, were severely defeated at Turtgan, and the Republic was left alone. Further, much of Albania was lost after Skanderbeg's death. However, the heroic resistance of Scutari under Antonio Loredon forced the Ottomans to retire from Albania, while a revolt in Cyprus gave back the island to the Cornaro family and, subsequently, to the Serenissima. Its prestige seemed reassured, but Scutari fell anyway 2 years later, and Friuli was again invaded and ravaged. On January 24, 1479, a treaty of peace was finally signed with the Ottomans. Venice had to cede Argard, Negroponte, Lemnos and Scutari, and pay an annual tribute of 10,000 golden ducati. 5 years later the agreement was confirmed by Mehmed II's successor, Bayezid II, with the peaceful exchange of the islands of Zakynthos and Cephalonia between the two sides. In 1482 Venice allied with Pope Sixtus IV in his attempt to conquer Ferrara, opposed Florence, Naples, Milan, and Urquell d'Este. When papal Venetian militias were smashed at the Battle of Campomarto, Sixtus changed side. Again alone, the Venetians were defeated in the Veronese by Alfonso of Calabria, but conquered Gallipoli in Apulia by sea. The balance was changed by Ludovico Sforza of Milan, who passed on the side of Venice. This led to a quick peace, which was signed near Brescia on 7 August 1484. In spite of the numerous setbacks suffered in the campaign, Venice obtained the Pelesini and Rovigard, and increased its prestige in the Italian peninsula at the expense of Florence especially. In the late 1480s, Venice fought 2 brief campaigns against the new Pope Innocent VIII and Sigismund of Austria. Venetian troops were also present at the Battle of Fornovo, in which the Italian League fought against Charles VIII of France. Alliance with Spain, Aragon in the following reconquest of the Kingdom of Naples granted it the control of the Apullian ports, important strategic bases commanding the lower Adriatic and the Ionian Islands. Despite the setbacks in the struggle against the Turks at the end of 15th century, with 180,000 inhabitants, Venice was the second largest city in Europe after Paris and probably the richest in the world. The territory of the Republic of Venice extended over approximately 70,000 square kilometers with 2.1 million inhabitants. Administratively, the territory was divided in 3 main parts: the Dogado, comprising the islets of the city and the original lands around the lagoon; the Stato d'Armor, comprising Istria, Dalmatia, the Albanian coasts, the Apullian ports, the Venetian Ionian Islands, Crete, the Aegean archipelago, Cyprus, and many fortress and commercial colonies in the major cities and ports around southeast Europe and the Middle East; the Stato di Terraferma, comprising Veneto, Friuli, Venetia Giulia, East Lombardy and Romagna.